Hey guys, welcome back. Last week was crazy town. Some interesting story with my friend Rainey, and thank you guys so much. I want to start this out by thanking y'all for your support. Seriously, um, this podcast would not be a success without your help and without your support. So please don't forget to make sure that you're sharing stuff and passing it on. And you can share it to Messenger, you can share it to Facebook, you can share it to text to your friends, like, oh my God, check this out, send it, whatever. But just do that because that's the only way it's going to get out there, right? If you're loving this and you're supporting me, then you're also sharing it because that is the best show of support possible. So I won't beat a dead horse to death. Anyway, you get the picture. Share it, please. Um, so I want to talk a little bit about my oldest son's dad. You know, Rainey and I met him, right? And it didn't go so well. Um, and then I met him a few months later again, and he wasn't who I thought he was. He portrayed himself. Um, he was very eloquent in how he spoke. He seemed very educated. Um, he was dressed nice. Boy, you can't judge a book by its cover for sure. He was handsome. He had a great laugh and a great smile and just a great demeanor about him. A wolf in sheep's clothing for sure. And, he drove a little red Honda Prelude. I mean, I knew he wasn't rich, but he paid the tab with $100 bill cash. And did I mention he was really cute, like real hot? So we started seeing each other for a short period of time. And then I became pregnant. In the period of time of knowing him, I never met his family. I knew he had a mom. I knew he had a brother and sister. But I'd never met any of his family. And gosh, if I had, I would have run for the hills. You know, I didn't come from a terrible background, right? I mean, there were a lot of things that happened to me, but financially, my mom was a single mom, of course, but we weren't terrible financially. We had the things that we wanted, we had the clothes that we needed, we had the toys that we wanted, and that was because of my grandmother and grandfather as well. And then when my mom married Jack, that was, he took care of us financially as well. Um, but this was a different situation. Um, I was already pregnant the first time I met Shane's mom. And I guess I didn't really realize what I was getting into. She was sweet, very sweet, um, but very, very poor. And it worried me for my kid's future. Like, what is my kid going to be around, right? What are the things that they're going to teach him? And um, it just seemed like they didn't want better for themselves, if that makes sense. Like, there's a lot of poor people in this world, so don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of poor people in this world that want better for themselves and do more for themselves. And these people were more like, what can I get for free? What can I do for free? Or what can I do for drugs? And I knew that Shane was a drug addict, as I was. I knew he was a big pot smoker, but I didn't know about the meth until later. Um, and so the story goes as this. We met at a hotel, and I think I talked about this. We met at a hotel in Livingston. I had, my 4-pack of Purple Passion that I carried up the stairs, and And I got pregnant that night, and the condom broke, and he didn't bother telling me. He just didn't care. And I found out later that the girl before me that he had dated or been with had had 5 abortions. And that was a hard pill to swallow, because that was his immediate reaction when please understand that my pauses are me like reliving this stuff, because I think about what I want to talk about, and then like really talking about it and digging down deep in it. It's hard shit. Like, it's hard stuff. Like, you remember those feelings that come up, and it's this is tough. Just hearing that she had had 5 abortions, and that was his immediate. We had pagers back then, right? And so I called him from a payphone, and I don't know why my phone at my house wasn't working, but I remember calling him from a payphone and waited for him to call me back. Like, I called his pager and waited for him to call me back. And when he called back, I said, "Hey, we need to talk." And he's like, "What's up?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm pregnant." And he's like, "Oh, okay. Well, do you want me to send you some money to take care of that?" And I was kind of like, no, that's not the plan. And that's exactly what he wanted. He wanted me to have an abortion, because that's what he had used as birth control in the past. And he was pissed. He was pissed when he found out that I was not going to abort this child. It wasn't something that I can do. I don't judge anybody. Like I've said before, I don't judge anybody for the decisions they've made for their life. Those are their own decisions. But for me personally, it wasn't an option. Especially after what had happened with my dog Drake and getting killed. And I was clean. I was clean at the time. I drank a little bit, but I didn't do any drugs at all. So my family thought it was a really bad idea for me to have a baby as well. I was wild. I was out of control wild. I mean, what kind of life is it for that kid, right? He didn't have a terrible life. We had some ups and downs. We grew up together, and our relationship has been not the easiest in the world, but I love him with everything in my soul. He saved my life. And I tell him that all the time. If it weren't for him, I'd have been OD'd for sure. So back to the story. Sorry, I just kind of squirreled a little bit, but I decided that even knowing the previous history of Shane and his ex, and then actually finding out from, I don't remember if it was his friends or his family or somebody that told me that he was abusive. I never saw that in him. I never saw that side of him, even when he was drinking. I never saw that side. He kept that hidden really, really well. But I knew he had previously put his hands on previous girlfriends he'd been with. There had been domestic violence charges and things like that. And I need to say something to this. He's a sorry piece of shit. And I don't get on here to hurt people, but I don't care if he has feelings in this whatsoever. If he ever hears this, if his family ever hears it, I don't care. He is a worthless person. Let's just be clear on that, okay? And I've always been the fixer, right? The problem solver. And I thought I could get this guy to love me enough that I could fix him. I could change him. How many of you ladies out there do that? How many of you are in relationships right now where you think, if I just love him more and I give him more and I do more for him, he'll love me enough and the emotional abuse will stop or the physical abuse will stop. How many of you out there think that? Because y'all are barking up the wrong tree. Leopards don't change their spots. They don't. If you're in an abusive relationship or you see those red flags in the beginning of the relationship, get out. You can't change him. It doesn't matter how magical all your business is, you can't change him. Ever. They have to want to change themselves. It's the same with anything, with drugs, with abuse, alcoholism, all of it. So I decided that since I didn't have Drake anymore, I was planning on moving to Dallas with my mom, and then I ended up being pregnant. So I figured I would give it a shot. And I moved to Houston into an apartment with Shane, and I was about 2 months pregnant. We moved into this apartment, and I was I had quit doing drugs, but I hadn't quit smoking yet. So I was smoking while I was pregnant. And the first red flag that I got was that he would come home from work and he would count the cigarettes in the ashtray. And let me tell you something. I loathe baseball. I cannot be anywhere where there's a baseball game on TV because it's all he watched, and it's just like a horrid trigger for me. Silly, right? Baseball games, really, but it's a horrible trigger. And I don't know if y'all remember the Yankee candle that was the Midsummer Night or something like that, and it smelled like Drakkar, and it was like a black candle. He would burn that. I had that candle and loved it, but he would burn it all the time. And I got to the point in my pregnancy where I couldn't smell it. So that was the first sign. He would come home and he would start. That was the first sign of control. And then there were some other little things. I was really sick one time. I'd cooked a Taco Bell dinner or something, and I was super sick. And I remember talking to the pharmacist about what I needed to help me stop throwing up and help me stop having diarrhea and stuff while I was pregnant, because you're limited to what you can take, right? So the pharmacist was like, God, y'all see my shoulders like all up like this because I'm so stressed out about this. The pharmacist said, like, you're going to have to get suppositories because that's the only thing that's going to help. So I remember crawling into the living room with him, and he's sitting on the couch and he's getting high with one of his friends. And I crawled into the living room because I was so sick. And I just said, I need you to go to the store for me. And he's like, well, what do you need? And I told him, he's like, I'm not going to the store to buy that. It's not happening. Now, mind you, we were 21. I was 21. He was like 23. So yeah, I could see where that was something embarrassing to buy, right? God, I didn't get any relief that night. He didn't go to the store. And then I went shopping one day. I remember I got a little job, a part-time job at Eckerd's. And, that was a drastic change from dancing to working at Eckerd's. You're going to talk about drastic changes. And I had gone shopping one day, and I had a Sears credit card, so I bought a couple of things for the baby, and I found a pair of shoes that I thought Shane might like. They were on sale for like $11. And he was at the apartment with one of the guys that he works with. He worked for an air conditioning company, and he was at the apartment, and I showed him the shoes I got him, and he was really pissed that I spent money. And it wasn't even his money. It was like my money. And remember, I was like a little trust fund baby. So I still had money from, my grandmother and things like that. So there were ways that, we paid for things without me having a job or a full-time job. Then I bought that with my own money. Well, he got pissed. And I made the mistake. I threw a shoe at him. I threw one of the shoes at him. And he got up and came after me. And the only reason he did not hit me is because his friend was there and stopped it and said, "You're not going to do that with me here." Scared the shit out of me. I may have been sexually abused in my life, and I may have been physically abused, but I had never, ever been hit by a man in my life. So, wasn't going to start now, especially being pregnant. So that's when, we talked about I had moved 33 times. Well, that's when I called my dad that next morning when he left for work. I called my dad and I said, I need to go. I need to move. And I need you and my brother to come. So my dad and my brother came to Houston. Shane left to go out of town to go do something. I don't know. We were fighting. He left to go out of town, and I talked to like the girl at the next door neighbor. She was actually the leasing manager for the apartments, and I told her what was happening and what was going on. I was pregnant. I had to get out of there, and she just happened to lose my paperwork. So it never went on my credit that I broke that lease. So I don't remember her name, but if she ever hears that, that was huge. Thank you for that. Anyway, when Shane got back on Sunday, it was an empty apartment. I was gone. I moved to my mom's. And he was pissed, but he didn't really know where I was. I didn't see him again until I was about 5 months pregnant. He kept calling and said he'd changed and all the things, right? All the things that they tell you to get you to believe that they've changed. So I saw him when I was about 5 months pregnant and realized that he hadn't changed and nothing had changed. He just wanted a piece of ass. That was it. And I went back home and I was like, that's it. I'm done. So there's a piece of this that I haven't really introduced. I haven't really talked about. I'm trying to keep track of my time as well. So, and I'll get into more of this later. There was a person that I was dating that I met that I was head over heels for. His name is Aaron. He's from Australia, and I'll tell you about how we met one day. But him and I, we were on rocky grounds. We broke up because I was doing drugs so bad. And all the stuff happened with Rainey, and then, and then Aaron and I got back together, and then we broke up again. And during that time period, that like 6 weeks of being broken up, is when I got pregnant with Brighton. And I went to Aaron as soon as I found out I was pregnant and told him that it wasn't his. And that was a really hard conversation. He's a family guy. 7 brothers and sisters. Big family. Beautiful family. Still in touch with him to this day. His sisters used to hate me, but they think I'm pretty great now, and I think they're pretty great too. We've all gotten close over the years, thank goodness for Facebook and us staying in touch. But I still wonder if I should have lied. I still wonder if I should have lied. I should have just told him it was his. I don't think he would have ever questioned it. He loved me that much. And I was so messed up that I didn't even know how to love myself. So I couldn't understand the gravity of someone loving me enough, right? Like that, like he did. But he did. He did for sure. So I told him about the pregnancy, and, we talked and kind of stayed apart. And then, like I said, I saw Shane when I was about 5 months pregnant, and then actually about 4 months pregnant. And then after that, Aaron and we still talked, and he actually stayed with me through the rest of the through the end of the pregnancy, almost the end of the pregnancy. And I know this is so convoluted, but this was my life. Like, this was how crazy it was. And I didn't really expect to talk about Aaron. But I guess it's such an intricate part um, of how I ended up where I ended up. So we were together during the last portion of my pregnancy. Aaron was the first person to feel Brighton kick. He was super great to me. I didn't know he was in trouble with some bad people, right? I had no idea. He hid it really well too. I was just a very trusting person back then. Well, I was living in Dallas with my mom. Erin and I were driving back and forth and seeing each other. And Erin came to Townie Small, where I worked one day at Motherhood Maternity. And his brother Bill was in town. And he came to the store where I was working. And I was 8.5 months pregnant. And he got down on his knee and he said, I want to love you. I want to love this baby. Will you marry me? That's some love right there. He didn't care. He didn't care that Brighton wasn't his. He loved him anyway. And the last thing you ever want to do is make a 8.5 month pregnant woman make a lifelong decision in that moment. And there was still that piece of me that thought I could fix Brighton's dad. And so I told Aaron no. I told him no. That I felt like I owed it to Brighton's father because, Brighton's dad had been calling me. Shane had been calling and talking and knowing the baby was coming close to being due, to my due date. So I told Aaron no, and I said, I just feel like I owe it to Brighton's real dad to give it a shot, to give it a chance. So I did. I got back together with Brighton's dad. I did not call Aaron. I ended up being 6 days late, and I got induced. And man, so God, this is, even looking back on this, I don't even know how I kept up with this. It's so messed up. It's so very messed up. So, sorry, I'm super distracted because there's so much noise going on outside this recording studio. So I get back to having the baby, right? And I'm 6 days late, and I'm supposed to be induced. And Shane was supposed to pick me up at 8 o'clock that night and take me to the hospital. He didn't. He didn't show up. Typical piece of shit. So my mom wasn't available to take me. So I called my boss that I worked at Motherhood Maternity, and I called my boss, Danielle, and she took me to the hospital. And about 11 o'clock that night, Shane showed up drunk, high. Oh, I was pissed. My mom was pissed. Everybody was pissed. My mom had gone to Lamaze classes with me. She supported my whole pregnancy. She supported me my whole pregnancy. Went to Lamaze classes with me, did the whole 9 yards. And she was livid because when he got there, I wanted him in the room with me and not her. They would only allow one person in the room to stay with me. Anyway, so I went through labor, had the baby. Shane was there. He came home with us from the hospital. He stayed for a couple of days. I remember him bitching at me about why Brighton was crying so much. I was a new mom, new nursing for the first time, still learning the ropes, didn't have a breast pump. I mean, I was 21 years old. I had no idea what I was freaking doing. Like, I knew how to change diapers and stuff from working in a daycare, but I had no idea what I was doing. And then he took off and left. I got a money order from him 2 weeks later for like $150 to help buy diapers. And that was it. One of the things that was a real big deal in the hospital was I did not give Brighton Shane's sole last name. I hyphenated it with my maiden name and his father's because I knew I'd be a single mom and I wanted my name tied to him somehow. Shane's the type of person that he's always like the women that came after me. He was married to one girl and he broke her arms, both of her arms, with a pipe, like a pipe, a metal pipe. Another girl that he was, I don't know if they were actually married, but another one of his baby mamas, he broke her orbital bone. He hit her so hard in the face, he broke her orbital bone. So I'm so grateful that I got out of that. He also got another girl pregnant when Brighton was 10 months old. He got an 18-year-old pregnant and she had an abortion. And the girl that he broke the orbital bone with, she was a drug addict. They had a baby, and which is Brighton's half brother. And that child was taken away from them by the state and is in a wonderful family with kids and adopted and living a good life now, thank God. But he's still the same. He's 50 something years old. He still lives at his mama's house. He still gets drunk every day. He owes $40,000 in child support, more than that now. And I'll never see a penny of it, and neither will Brighton. And that's okay. I mean, I make pretty good money, so I'm not going to stress over the money. But he got out of all the responsibility. I took Brighton to see him on Christmas, and I said, hey, Brighton was like 3 or 4 years old. And I said, if you could refrain from smoking any weed or doing any drugs while we're there, that'd be great. And as soon as we got there, he's like, well, I'm going to go smoke a joint. And I'm like, okay, well, then we're going to leave. And he's like, okay. And we left. I can't tell you how many parking lots we sat in, Brighton and I, waiting for Shane to show up on his weekends, sitting in a truck stops with me going in and paging his phone and waiting, and Brighton being devastated that he had to drive back home with me because Dad wasn't there. His dad didn't show up. I mean, like, fucking piece of shit. Like, if you put me alone in a room with him and tied him to a chair, I would probably rip every shred of skin off of that man's body very slowly for him to be able to feel the pain that he put our son through, my son through. Man. That person makes my blood boil. The things he did. He doesn't deserve to be a father. He doesn't deserve any of it. He doesn't even deserve me talking about this, but it's a hard part of my life. He was in prison for a while when Brighton was little for drugs, domestic violence, lots of things. And he could have been so much. He had a good heart when he wasn't high or drunk. He could have been a lot, but he didn't want more for himself. That goes back to what I was talking about in the beginning about having someone that wants more for themselves. He didn't want that. He wanted the easy way. So he works for cash now. So to avoid paying child support, to avoid paying the money that he owes, he works cash only jobs. And he lives off his mom. And she allows it. So Brighton hasn't spoken to his dad since he was about 17 or 18 years old. He's 25 now. Shane lives 30 minutes from us. And not that Brighton's missing anything by any means, because he's not. He's not missing anything having a piece of shit in his life. But it messes you up. It messes with your head when you don't have your dad or your mom or the person that you want to love. Like, there's a piece of you missing. So if you're someone out there that doesn't have kids, or I'm sorry, if you're someone out there that has kids and you don't see your kids, you're pretty horrible. Seriously. Like, you have no idea what your selfishness is doing to your kids. I've watched it firsthand with not one but two kids. So let's fast forward a little bit. Brighton was born. Shane found out later that he asked me one time, he said, "Do you regret giving him my last name?" And like, I had this whole scheme down, right? We're in the hospital, and the lady calls me on the phone. She's like, "I want to come up and get his birth certificate information." I said, "Well, here's the deal," because Shane wasn't in the room. I was like, "So here's the deal. I don't want to give him his last name, but he's not going to sign the birth certificate if he doesn't have his last name." And she was like, I'll figure something out. And I was like, okay, like, this lady was cool. So she comes in and she says, I have the birth certificate information, but I wasn't for sure how you wanted to spell Christopher. So I just wanted to come down and double check. And she said, since I'm here, why don't you guys go ahead and sign it, and I'll get everything else filled out and bring it back to you. So he did. He signed it, and he never saw it when it was brought back. But it was my last name and his last name hyphenated. And anyway, he asked me when Brighton was about 4 months old. He said, "Do you regret that?" And I said, "No. Do you regret giving him my last name?" And I said, "Well, actually, I didn't give him your last name. It's hyphenated." And you would have thought that dude was going to blow a top. Like, oh my God, he was so pissed. And fast forward so many years, when Brighton turned 18, he'd had enough. And so he dropped his dad's last name. We went and he wanted to. I'd always left him the option. I always left Gage the option because he had both of our names hyphenated. And Brighton chose to keep my maiden name as his last name. And drop anything having to do with his father's side names. Made me a little proud, actually, but sad in the same regard, because I wanted him to have a relationship, but not with that man. So, Shane disappeared after Brighton was born. I got a money order from him, and I shortly after, well, I'm skipping over myself here. Let me go back to Aaron for just a second, because one of the things that Aaron said to me while I was pregnant is, he said, "I'm really worried about you being a mom. I don't think you're going to be a very good mom because I think you're too selfish to be a good mom." And that always rang in my head, right? Something I always heard. So when Brighton was 2 weeks old, I came back to Tyler from Dallas, and I went to see Aaron. And because, Shane had disappeared again, wasn't answering his pages, no phone calls, no nothing. So I went to see Aaron. And I remember sitting on the couch, and I was nursing Brighton, and Aaron was just standing in the hallway, and he was just watching me. And I just looked at him. I was like, "What?" And he said, "I never thought that I would see the day that you were unselfish enough to nurse a baby." He said, "I never thought I would see that." And I was like, well, I couldn't imagine not nursing him. That's like for me, that was the ultimate bond, and it's different for everybody. Some people it's for, and some people it's not. But for me, it was. And it made the bond for us even stronger. And from then on, Aaron and I were together. and we were raising Brighton, like, I'd come back and forth from Dallas to Tyler, and we were raising Brighton together, and then I found out he was in even more trouble. And he's from Australia, and so when Brighton was 9 months old, he'd been the constant in Brighton's life. Um, his parents sent him a plane ticket back to Australia, and I remember like the last few months that we knew we had together, we cried every time we were together because we knew it was like the end. I tried to go to get a visa to go to Australia, and Shane would not sign the paperwork to let me take Brighton out of the country. So I couldn't go with Aaron. And I know, some of God's greatest gifts are unanswered prayers. I know that. And the life I have now, I would have never met Danny. And Aaron had a lot of things to work out. But he was definitely the first love of my life. The most country Australian person with an Australian accent you would ever meet, like head over heels when I first met him. And I'll talk more about that eventually, because I want you to know more about him, because he's such a great guy now. And he was a great guy then. I mean, he loved me very much, and Brighton, but he was in so much trouble that he had to go, and he didn't have a choice, and he couldn't take me with him. So when Brighton was 9 months old, we met him at the airport, drove him to the airport, and said goodbye. And that was 25 years ago. That was a long time ago. And we did our best to stay in touch, just hard. He needed to move on in his life. I needed to move on in my life. He met his beautiful wife. They have 3 beautiful children. And I'm very blessed and fortunate to be allowed to be a part of that life. And oh my gosh, his daughters are gorgeous. His son's just cute. And so we've talked, right? We keep in touch, and our spouses know we keep in touch, that we're very special people in each other's lives. But he's a good guy. He just made some bad decisions. But he was always good to me, and he was always good to Brighton. Those were hard times, and I think about it, like for Brighton, by the time he was 9 months old, he had already, and I'm going to use this word because it's the actual definition of it. He'd already been abandoned by his father and the person that, I don't know, probably should have been his father. But he'd already been abandoned by 2 different men, and like I said, I was young, and I dated, and I was trying to, find someone to spend the rest of my life with. I didn't always make the best choices. Brighton got drugged through that a little bit. I wasn't perfect. None of us are. But I stayed clean. And, Shane came around here and there, but it was never consistent. Brighton went to see him when he was about 10 years old, and Brighton had made some money with me. He had made $10 for some chores that he did. And he came home, and he said that that Shane had borrowed that $10 from him to buy beer and never gave him the money back. Brighton would come home. I would go take Brighton to the grocery store before he would go to his dad's house, because they were so poor. He felt bad eating their food. So he would go all weekend and just eat bread. Like the shit that my kid did and went through, it still blows my mind, and I probably don't even know the half of it. And I don't really want to know, to be honest with you. I don't want to know what all they put him through. I know that, that Shane's mom probably loved him as much as she could, the way she could. She did teach him how to play the piano, which was pretty cool. So I guess all this to say, you can't change them. They're not going to change. if you're in a relationship and you see those red flags, please get out. Please don't think they're going to change. Please don't have a baby with that person. Don't do that to your future kid. Someone said something to me one time, and it said, don't ever have sex with anyone that you wouldn't want to spend the rest of your life with. And that's hard. Like, that's hard to grasp when you're partying and you're having a good time and you're being wild and crazy, right? That's hard to grasp. But man, it was some smart advice. I wish I'd have listened to it a long time ago. I would not trade the kids that I have. I would not trade them for the world. But I wish for them that their fathers were different. I wish for them that very much. Baby daddy drama, y'all. The struggle is real. And there's more. You know, I haven't even gotten into too much about Gage's dad, but I'll get into that too. I've got a guest coming next time, and I'm excited about her. It'll be a little bit of a twist. She was in an abusive relationship, and she's also in Xyngular with me, and she's like the top income earner in the company. And to hear her story, it's pretty incredible. So that's why I kind of wanted to talk about abusive situations and the abuse that I went through and things like that, and the emotional abuse that your kids go through too. It affects everything. Remember, everything you do affects everyone around you in one way or another. So don't ever forget that. Remember that the next time you don't show up, or the next time you say something that you shouldn't say. It affects everybody, not just you. So anyway, thanks for listening to my ramblings today. I didn't think it was going to go this long, but it did. That was hard. So thanks for getting through that with me. I hope I didn't confuse you. I'll talk more about it later. Okay. Peace out, homies. Oh, last thing. You can find this podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. Shout out to Kimber Creek Media for the use of the studio. They are amazing. Super grateful for them. And also, don't forget to check out Rainey Wheeler's book, Unresolved Me. She was on last week, so don't forget about that book. It's on Amazon already. It's already dropped. Anyway, thanks for listening. Please don't forget to share this, guys. Share it, share it, share it. I can't get out there and help other people, and they can't hear these stories that may help them without you. So appreciate you. Love you guys. Peace out, homies.